There is no turning back now. What is done is done.
The hall adjusted its gravity twice before settling, which everyone pretended not to notice. A few veterans widened their stance by instinct. A few dignitaries laughed as if it were intentional. Somewhere overhead, a translation drone coughed, rebooted, and displayed the word welcome upside down before correcting itself with visible embarrassment. That was how the gathering began, with small, manageable failures. The war hero stood where he always stood, which was to say, exactly where the hall expected him to be. The protocols had been written around his habits centuries ago. He did not bow. He did not gesture. He waited and the galaxy waited with him. This was a familiar arrangement, comforting in its predictability. The announcer cleared 3 throats, his own, his secondary vocal sac, and a ceremonial one grown specifically for events like this. "We are honored," he began, then glanced at the scrolling list of titles and winced. "Extremely honored, immeasurably honored, statistically honored beyond reasonable," the list reset. He sighed. "We are honored to welcome the one whose victories need no explanation." A ripple of approval passed through the seats. Someone applauded early, then committed to it out of pride. The hero let it pass. He had learned long ago that interrupting applause only made it longer. When the noise finally died, he leaned forward by a fraction. Sensors flared, recorders activated. History sharpened its stylus. "I was asked," he said, "to speak about humans." That was all. The hall reacted the way it always did when an old certainty cracked. There was a murmur, quickly suppressed, followed by polite stillness that fooled no one. Humans were a topic, not a subject. They existed in footnotes and sealed archives, in anecdotes that ended before conclusions began. Everyone knew the stories, no one agreed on them. That was comfortable, too. A junior aide dropped a data slate. It clattered loudly, skidded, and came to rest against the hero's platform. The aide froze, then bowed so hard it seemed medically inadvisable. The hero nudged the slate back with his foot. "Careful," he said mildly. "Those are heavier than they look." Laughter broke out, relieved and grateful. The tension loosened its grip. The hero continued. "When I first encountered humans, I was disappointed." A few heads tilted. This was new. They did not match their reputation. Their ships arrived late. Their formations were untidy. He paused, as if searching for the kindest word. They argued with each other on open channels. At one point, one apologized for interrupting the argument. More laughter, this time genuine. A historian made a note, underlined it, then crossed it out, unsure whether humor counted as data. "I assumed," the hero went on, "that they would compensate for this with brutality. That is the usual pattern." He let the implication hang. They did not. The hall's environmental systems adjusted again, subtly. No one commented. A diplomat in the front row leaned toward a neighbor and whispered, "Is this the part where they surprise us with a superweapon?" The neighbor shook their head. "Too early, maybe after refreshments." "There were moments," the hero said, "when they could have ended the conflict, cleanly, efficiently. I prepared my final contingencies." He paused. They did not take those moments. Silence spread, thinner now, edged with unease. "One of my officers suggested they were stalling," he added. Another suggested incompetence. A third suggested sabotage. A faint tightening at the corner of his mouth suggested amusement. The humans suggested a ceasefire. For medical evacuation. A chair squeaked. Someone laughed, then stopped when no one joined them. "I declined," the hero said. They proceeded anyway. A ripple of confusion moved through the hall, followed by a wave of data requests that the archives quietly denied. The hero watched it happen, patient as ever. "They asked permission," he said, "to rescue my wounded." A pause, then softly, "They waited for an answer." The hall held its breath, a collective habit it had never needed before. "I tell you this," the hero said, "because you have heard many things about humans, that they are violent, that they are reckless, that they are driven by emotion rather than reason." He inclined his head. "All of that is true." Relief flickered, brief and premature. "But you have not been told," he continued, "what they choose not to do." The hall's lights dimmed by a fraction, as if leaning closer. "Legends," the hero said, "are built on what is done in moments of power." He looked out over the assembled histories, the polished medals, the carefully curated myths. Humans are not legendary because of their victories. He straightened and the recording system strained to keep up. "They are legendary," he said, "because they hesitate." Somewhere in the upper tiers, a translator drone emitted a confused chirp and shut itself off. No one laughed this time. They told her the assignment was ceremonial, which was the first joke, though no one laughed when they said it. Ceremonial assignments never required emergency implants behind the ear or a waiver acknowledging that memory edits might be incomplete. Still, she signed. Everyone did. Refusing paperwork was considered suspicious behavior in 3 separate jurisdictions. The transport arrived late, which was also apparently human tradition. The docking bay's automated greeter repeated the welcome message 5 times, each with slightly different punctuation, before giving up and muttering something about software updates. She found that oddly comforting. Machines, at least, were honest when they were confused. The humans greeted her in person. This, too, was unusual. Most species preferred holograms or drones for first contact. Humans preferred bodies, which she immediately decided was either charming or deeply unsettling. She had not yet gathered enough data to choose. One of them extended a hand. She checked her briefings. She took it. The grip was firm but cautious, as if he expected her hand to explode. "Sorry about the delay," he said. "Someone rerouted our ship to avoid a migration." She blinked. "Of what?" "Space whales," he replied, as if that clarified everything. Then, seeing her expression, he added, "They get grumpy if you wake them." She made a note. It consisted entirely of a question mark. They escorted her through a ship that hummed like it was thinking too hard. Everything worked, but nothing matched. Panels from different generations. Interfaces layered on top of older interfaces. Warning labels with handwritten annotations arguing with the printed ones. At one point, an alarm sounded briefly, then shut itself off with what could only be described as embarrassment. "False positive," someone said. Again. "How many false positives do you get?" she asked. "Oh, dozens," another replied cheerfully. "We prefer it that way." She did not ask why. She was still processing the whales. The briefing began without ceremony. No dramatic displays, no projected battle maps. They offered her a chair, then another, just in case. She chose the first. It squeaked apologetically. A human officer spoke. He did not introduce himself. No titles. No rank markers, just a person explaining a situation as if it were a shared inconvenience. "We're here," he said, "because things might get messy. We'd like them not to." She waited for the rest. It did not come. And she prompted. "And that's the plan," he said. "Not messy." There was laughter, actual laughter. At a war briefing, she leaned forward. "You are aware," she said carefully, "that the opposing fleet has authorized escalation to planetary sterilization." "Yes," the officer said. "We've read their memo, bit dramatic if you ask me." "You are outnumbered," she added. "Frequently," he said, "it builds character." Another human raised a hand. "Also, technically, we're only outnumbered if you count ships." She looked at him. "What else would I count?" He smiled. "Evacuation corridors." Silence followed, not tense silence, thinking silence. She recognized it because it made her uncomfortable. "You've mapped civilian escape routes," she said. "Yes," several voices replied, "on enemy worlds." "Yes, in advance. Always." She felt her skin shift, the faint iridescence along her arms betraying her agitation. One of the humans noticed and offered her a beverage. "What is it?" she asked. "Coffee," he said. "Or tea, or both. We might have mixed them up." She declined. "Why?" she asked instead. "Why prepare exits for people you might be fighting?" The officer shrugged. "Because there'll still be people afterward." A pause, then quietly, "If we do this right." The ship shuddered, someone cursed. Another alarm chirped, then stopped. "False positive," came the familiar refrain. She realized with a strange flicker of humor that this was the most alarming thing she had ever witnessed. A military force that treated annihilation like a clerical error to be avoided. Later, much later, when she filed her report, she struggled to summarize the encounter. Her superiors would want numbers, probabilities, threat assessments. She gave them a joke instead. "Humans," she wrote, "are dangerous because they keep asking whether they should long after everyone else has decided that they can." She stared at the line, then added, almost as an afterthought, "They are very bad at being legends. That may be the problem." The system flagged the report for review. She smiled to herself. The decision arrived as a message stamped urgent and "please don't panic," which immediately caused panic in 3 departments and mild curiosity in 1. The humans gathered anyway. They always did. Sometimes they even sat down. "Okay," someone said, "so the other side has escalated their escalation." "How many levels up is that now?" another asked. "Hard to say, they skipped a few." Creative types. There was a sound like cutlery being dropped. Someone muttered an apology to no one in particular. A screen flickered, displayed a list, then replaced it with a smaller list, then removed both and showed a cartoon cat wearing a helmet. The cat saluted, the screen went dark. "Is that relevant?" she asked. "No," a human replied, "but it helps morale." She believed them. She shouldn't have, but she did. The proposal was simple, which made everyone suspicious. Humans proposed disengagement, not retreat, not surrender, disengagement. They would withdraw from contested zones, open corridors, and transmit the coordinates publicly. They would leave supplies, medical units, power generators. They would announce it ahead of time. "You're telling them exactly where you'll be," she said. "Yes." "And where you won't." "Yes, and you expect them not to exploit that." "Well," someone said, "we expect them to consider it." She waited. "And if they do?" A pause, someone scratched their head. "Then we'll reconsider." She stared. "Reconsider what?" "Whether we keep disengaging." The room was quiet but not tense, more like a room waiting for a kettle to boil. "This makes no sense," she said. "That's what we're counting on," came the reply. They sent the message. Open channels, clear language, no threats, no conditions. It took exactly 11 minutes for the response to arrive. It was angry. It was long. It accused humans of weakness, deception, manipulation, and poor formatting. One human read it aloud, then frowned. "They used the wrong tense in paragraph 4. Another leaned over. "Yeah, but the insult was solid." "They called us sentimental." "That's fair." The fleet did not advance. It hovered. It debated. It argued internally loudly enough that some of it leaked onto public bands. Humans listened. They always listened. Someone made popcorn. No one questioned it. Hours passed, then days, then a single ship crossed the corridor, then another, then a third broadcasting medical distress. Humans responded immediately, too immediately, some thought. They deployed rescue craft, announced trajectories, complained about traffic congestion. "Please keep your wounded limbs inside the shuttle at all times," someone joked over comms. Laughter followed, nervous but real. She watched it happen and felt something twist uncomfortably inside her. This was not strategy. This was something else wearing strategy's uniform. Later, after the corridors were used, after the fighting stalled into confusion, after no one quite knew how to resume hostilities without looking unreasonable, the other side transmitted a final message. They requested terms, the humans read it twice, then a third time because someone had spilled coffee on the console. "Do we accept?" someone asked. A human officer shook his head. "We counter." "With limits." There it was again, that word. They offered restrictions on themselves, on weapons, on response times, on pursuit. They wrote clauses that bound them more tightly than anyone else in the room. They added oversight. They invited inspection. They included an appendix explaining why. "This is absurd," she said softly. "Yes," came the reply, "but it's a useful kind." When the agreement was signed, there was no celebration, just relief. Someone suggested cake. Someone else reminded them the oven was still broken. As the fleets dispersed, she filed another report. This one was shorter. She didn't bother with jokes. "Humans ended the conflict," she wrote, "by making continuation socially embarrassing." The system did not flag this one. It simply asked if she was sure. She was not. But she submitted it anyway. The hall reconvened without fanfare, which for the hall was dramatic restraint. The gravity stayed put. The translation drones behaved. Someone had clearly threatened them. She stood among the observers this time, no longer junior, no longer pretending this was ceremonial. Her skin no longer betrayed her thoughts as easily. She had learned to school it, the way humans did their faces. Growth, she had discovered, was mostly about learning which reactions were useful. The war hero spoke again, because eventually silence becomes another kind of lie. "You have asked," he said, "what became of the humans after that conflict?" A ripple of interest moved through the chamber. Someone leaned forward too far and had to pretend it was intentional. "They returned to their borders," he continued. "They argued about whether they had done enough. They argued about whether they had done too much. They formed committees, then subcommittees, then committees to review the subcommittees." A pause. They found this comforting. A low chuckle passed through the hall. The hero allowed it. "They did not expand," he said. "They did not capitalize. They did not convert goodwill into leverage." He looked mildly irritated by this, as if it offended some aesthetic principle. "They sent apologies. Some of them were handwritten." She remembered those notes, the uneven lettering, the ink smudges. She had kept one, though she told herself it was for evidence. Other species, the hero said, found this behavior confusing, some found it insulting. A few attempted to provoke a response. The hall grew quieter. They succeeded, he said, briefly. The humor returned, dark and dry. Humans are patient, the hero went on. They are not infinite. He did not elaborate. He did not need to. Everyone in the hall had read the redacted reports. The engagements that ended not with annihilation, but with absolute containment. Fleets neutralized without spectacle. Command structures dismantled with surgical precision, the kind of force that did not rage but concluded. They stopped, he said, when the threat stopped. She felt the weight of that sentence settle. Not punishment, not dominance, stopping. A delegate raised a hand. Why tell us this now? The hero considered. Because you have begun to mythologize them incorrectly. A murmur, mild offense, mild panic. You are teaching your young to fear human aggression, he said. You are wrong. He inclined his head toward her just enough to acknowledge her presence. You should teach them to... She almost laughed, almost. When the session ended, people lingered. That, too, was new. Conversations overlapped. Old assumptions were gently, angrily, nervously prodded. Someone suggested updating the archives. Someone else suggested not doing that too quickly. She left before the debates could calcify. Later, on a quieter station with unreliable lighting and very reliable coffee, she met a human she recognized. Older now. More lines around the eyes, still no titles. You look well, he said. You look responsible, she replied. I'm sorry. He laughed. We tried to avoid it. They sat. They did not talk about the war. They talked about repairs. About how difficult it was to explain humans to non-humans without resorting to metaphors that made everyone sound worse. Do you regret it? She asked finally. The restraint, the hesitation. He thought properly this time. No, he said, but I understand why it scares people. She nodded. She did too now, not because she feared what humans might do, but because she had learned what they chose to carry instead. The weight of decision, the burden of stopping. When they parted, she filed her final report. No jokes this time, just one line. Humans are not the measure of how much force a species can wield, she wrote. They are the measure of how much it can refuse. She sent it, closed the channel, and felt something settle inside her. Not certainty, not comfort, but clarity. For the first time since that so-called ceremonial assignment, she understood what she had become. Not a witness, not a translator, but a reminder. And for once, that felt like enough.